It was just another ordinary Tuesday at the office, or at least that's how the day began. The sky had been threatening rain all morning, dark clouds hanging low, casting shadows over our downtown office building. I checked the weather app on my phone before leaving my apartment and grabbed my sturdy black umbrella, the large kind that could easily shelter two people if needed. Little did I know how significant that simple decision would become later that day. The forecast had predicted a downpour, and for once, the meteorologists were absolutely right. I remember sitting at my desk, typing away at my keyboard, occasionally glancing out the window as the first few raindrops began to tap against the glass, creating tiny rivulets that distorted the view of the city below. Let me introduce myself. I work at a marketing agency, one of those modern open-concept offices where privacy is sacrificed for collaboration and team synergy. My desk sits across from Ryan's. We've been co-workers for about 8 months now. Ryan joined the company last spring, and from day one, there was something about him that caught my attention. He's tall, with the kind of shoulders that fill out a dress shirt perfectly, and he has this habit of running his hand through his dark hair when he's concentrating. His laugh is infectious, deep, and genuine, the kind that makes you want to be in on the joke. We've developed an easy friendship over shared deadlines and office politics, but I've always been acutely aware of the boundaries between us, not just professional ones, but personal too. You see, Ryan is straight, with a girlfriend he mentions occasionally, and I've been careful to keep my attraction to him firmly locked away, something I acknowledge to myself but never act upon. The rain started in earnest around 4 in the afternoon. What began as a gentle patter quickly transformed into a torrential downpour, the kind that turns streets into rivers and sends people running for cover. I could hear the collective groans around the office as people realized their commutes home would be thoroughly soaked. Our office windows vibrated with each thunderclap, and the fluorescent lights flickered once or twice, adding to the dramatic atmosphere. I watched as colleagues began packing up, pulling rain jackets from desk drawers and rummaging through bags for forgotten umbrellas. Ryan was working intently on something, his brow furrowed in concentration, seemingly oblivious to the weather drama unfolding outside. I found myself watching him more than my computer screen, noticing how the blue light from his monitor highlighted the angles of his face. There's something intimate about observing someone when they don't know they're being watched. You see them as they truly are, unguarded and authentic. I quickly looked away when he suddenly stretched and glanced up, not wanting to be caught staring. "Sounds like the apocalypse out there," he said with a grin, nodding toward the window where rain was now coming down in sheets. I smiled back, agreeing that it looked pretty miserable. We both returned to our work, but I noticed him checking his phone a few times, a slight frown forming on his face. Around 5:30, as people were starting to leave for the day, I saw Ryan stand up and walk to the window, peering out with an expression of dismay. I couldn't help but ask if everything was all right. "I checked the weather this morning, and it said clear skies all day," he explained, running that hand through his hair again. "I walked to work, and now I don't have an umbrella or a raincoat. My apartment is 15 blocks from here." He laughed, but I could tell he was genuinely concerned about getting completely drenched. "Maybe I'll just wait it out," he added, glancing back at the angry sky that showed no signs of clearing. I felt a flutter in my chest, part nervousness, part excitement, as I realized I had a solution to his problem. "I've got a big umbrella," I offered, trying to sound casual. "We could share if you want. I'm heading toward Franklin Street anyway." This wasn't entirely true. Franklin Street would add about 10 minutes to my usual route home, but the white lie seemed harmless in the moment. The look of relief on Ryan's face made my small deception worth it. "Are you sure?" he asked, his expression brightening. "That would be amazing. I promise I don't take up too much space." He gestured to his broad shoulders with a self-deprecating smile that made my heart do a little skip. "No problem at all," I assured him, beginning to pack up my things while trying to ignore the quickening of my pulse. It was just an umbrella share, after all, co-workers helping each other out. Nothing more. But as I shut down my computer and gathered my belongings, I couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation building inside me. 15 blocks. 15 blocks of standing close to Ryan, our shoulders touching, sheltered together from the storm. We made our way to the elevator with a few other colleagues, everyone chatting about weekend plans and complaining about the weather. Ryan stood next to me, our reflections visible in the polished metal doors. We were almost the same height, though he had a few inches on me. In the reflection, we looked good standing side by side, and I quickly pushed that thought away. The elevator descended, and with each floor, I became increasingly aware of what I had offered and what it would entail. The lobby was crowded with people hesitating at the entrance, staring out at the deluge. Some made mad dashes to nearby cars or bus stops, while others huddled under inadequate newspaper shields. Ryan and I stood at the glass doors, watching the chaos. "Ready for this?" I asked, unfurling my umbrella as we stepped under the building's awning. He nodded, and we moved to the edge of the shelter, preparing to step out into the storm. I opened the umbrella, and Ryan stepped close to me, much closer than we'd ever been before. I could smell his cologne, something woody and subtle that I'd caught hints of across our desks, but never this directly. Our shoulders pressed together as we positioned ourselves under the umbrella's protection. "Is this okay?" he asked, seeming aware of our proximity but practical about the necessity of it. I nodded, not trusting my voice in that moment, and we stepped out into the rain together. The sound was immediate and overwhelming. Rain hammering against the fabric of the umbrella, splashing on the pavement, rushing through gutters. It created a strange bubble of privacy around us, as if we were in our own world separated from everything else by a curtain of water. We had to walk closely, our arms and shoulders constantly touching, occasionally bumping hips when we had to navigate around puddles or other pedestrians. Each contact sent a small jolt through me that I tried desperately to ignore. "Thanks again for this," Ryan said, having to raise his voice slightly to be heard over the rain. I would have been completely soaked. His face was just inches from mine as we walked, and I noticed details I'd never had the opportunity to see before. The slight stubble on his jaw that had grown throughout the day, a small scar near his right eyebrow, the exact color of his eyes, hazel with flecks of gold near the pupils. "Happy to help," I replied, focusing on keeping the umbrella centered over us both, which was challenging given the gusting wind. "Consider it payback for helping me with that impossible deadline last month." He laughed at that, the sound warm and close in our shared space. A particularly strong gust of wind hit us then, nearly turning the umbrella inside out. Ryan instinctively put his arm around my shoulder to steady us both, pulling me closer to his side. The movement was practical, protective even, but my heart raced at the casual intimacy of it. "Whoa, almost lost it there," he said, keeping his arm where it was as we continued walking. I wasn't sure if he left it there out of necessity or comfort, but I wasn't about to question it. The rain seemed to grow even louder, drumming against our shelter, creating a soundtrack to this unexpected moment of closeness. Water splashed around our feet as we navigated the flooded sidewalks, occasionally having to press even closer together to avoid getting wet. We talked as we walked, about work at first, safe territory, but gradually shifting to more personal topics. The rain provided a strange sense of confidentiality, as if anything we said would be washed away by the storm. Ryan told me about his childhood in Michigan, how he used to love thunderstorms like this one, sitting on his parents' covered porch to watch the lightning. I shared stories of my own, finding myself being more open than I typically would be with a coworker. There's something about physical proximity that breaks down conversational barriers, I suppose. At one point, we had to cross a particularly flooded intersection. Ryan's hand moved from my shoulder to the small of my back, guiding me through the rushing water at the curb. It was such a natural gesture, protective and considerate, but it left me feeling both comforted and conflicted. These were the kinds of touches that friends might share, but they felt different in the context of my unspoken feelings for him. I wondered if he could feel my heart pounding, if he had any idea of the effect he had on me. "Look at that," Ryan said suddenly, pointing to where the rain was catching the light from a nearby storefront, creating a miniature rainbow in the midst of the downpour. It was beautiful, unexpected, a moment of magic in the middle of urban chaos. We paused for a moment to appreciate it, standing still while the city rushed around us. In that brief silence, I became hyper-aware of every point of contact between us, shoulder to shoulder, his arms still lightly touching my back, our hands occasionally brushing as we both held onto the umbrella handle. The rain drummed above us, louder than our breathing, louder than the thoughts racing through my mind. As we resumed walking, Ryan asked about my weekend plans. I mentioned a book I was looking forward to finishing and a new restaurant I wanted to try. You should check out that new exhibition at the Modern Art Museum, he suggested. Based on what you've said about art you like, I think you'd really enjoy it. I was touched that he had paid attention to my casual mentions of art preferences over the months we'd worked together. There's something particularly meaningful about being truly heard, about someone remembering the small details you share in passing. We were about halfway to his apartment when the rain briefly intensified, driving us to take shelter under a store awning. We stood facing each other, the umbrella temporarily closed, water dripping from its edges. Droplets clung to Ryan's hair and eyelashes, and I had a nearly overwhelming urge to reach out and brush them away. Instead, I gripped the umbrella handle tighter, anchoring myself to something solid while my thoughts swirled like the storm around us. I've really enjoyed getting to know you these past few months, Ryan said unexpectedly, his voice quieter now that we weren't competing with the rain. You're easy to talk to. Not everyone at work is, you know. There was a genuineness to his statement that made my chest tighten. This was the cruelty of attraction, these moments of connection that could mean everything or nothing at all. To him, this was probably just friendship, coworkers becoming friends. To me, it was a complex tangle of emotions I couldn't fully unravel. Same here, I managed to reply, hoping my voice sounded normal. It makes the 9 to 5 much more bearable when you actually like the people you work with. He smiled at that, and for a moment, I let myself imagine a different scenario, one where the boundaries between us weren't so clearly defined, where I could interpret his smile as something more than friendly appreciation. The rain lightened slightly, and we ventured back out, resuming our close position under the umbrella. Our conversation drifted to music, discovering some surprising shared favorites. Ryan hummed a few bars of a song we both loved. The vibration of it felt through our pressed shoulders. There's an intimacy to shared cultural touchstones, a recognition that despite our differences, we've been moved by the same melodies, the same lyrics. As we walked, I couldn't help but notice how people glanced at us. 2 men huddled close under one umbrella. I wondered what they assumed about us, if they thought we were a couple navigating the storm together. The thought both thrilled and saddened me. Ryan seemed completely unaware of these looks, or if he noticed, he didn't care. There was a freedom in his unself-consciousness that I envied. We turned onto Franklin Street, and Ryan pointed to a building about half a block ahead. That's me there, he said, and I felt a pang of disappointment that our journey was almost over. The rain had eased to a gentle patter now, as if the weather too was reluctant for this moment to end. We slowed our pace slightly, and I wondered if it was deliberate on both our parts, or just my wishful thinking. Thanks again for saving me from a complete soaking, Ryan said as we approached his building. This was nice. Much better than waiting out the storm at the office. There was a warmth to his voice that made me look up at him, our faces close under the shelter of the umbrella. For a brief moment, something passed between us, a recognition, perhaps, of the unexpected intimacy we'd shared, or maybe just gratitude for a kindness offered and accepted. We reached his door, and Ryan stepped away from the umbrella's protection, immediately getting hit by a few stray raindrops. You know, we should grab lunch sometime, he said, fishing his keys from his pocket. Outside of work, I mean. There's this great sandwich place around the corner I've been meaning to try. My heart did a complicated little dance in my chest. Was this just friendly colleague talk, or something more? The rational part of my brain knew it was almost certainly the former, but something in his expression, in the way he held my gaze a beat longer than necessary, left room for doubt. I'd like that, I replied simply, not wanting to overanalyze in the moment. Ryan smiled, that genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes, and for a second, I let myself believe that this connection between us, whatever it was, mattered to him too. He thanked me one more time, then disappeared into his building with a final wave. I stood there for a moment, still holding the umbrella, feeling the absence of his warmth beside me. The rain continued to fall around me, but it felt different now, less magical, more ordinary. I turned and began walking toward my own apartment, replaying moments from our walk in my mind. The pressure of his shoulder against mine, the sound of his laugh rising above the rain, the way he'd guided me through flooded intersections with a hand on my back. As I walked alone, I reflected on the complexity of human connection, how we can feel so close to someone physically while maintaining emotional distances. how boundaries can simultaneously protect us and isolate us. I thought about the rain, how it had created this bubble around us, how for 15 blocks it had been louder than our words, louder than my unspoken feelings, louder than the voice in my head warning me not to read too much into a simple act of umbrella sharing. I don't know what tomorrow at the office will bring. Perhaps nothing will change. We'll return to our comfortable professional friendship, the memory of our rain-soaked walk together gradually fading like water evaporating from pavement. Or perhaps something subtle will have shifted between us, a new dimension added to our relationship. What I do know is that for those 15 blocks, walking shoulder to shoulder under my umbrella, I felt a connection that transcended simple categories of colleague, friend, or potential lover. There was something pure about it. Two humans finding warmth and conversation amidst a storm, creating a momentary shelter not just from the rain, but from the isolation that often characterizes modern life. As I finally reached my own apartment building, I shook out my umbrella and closed it, the sound of the rain immediately becoming clearer without the fabric barrier. I realized that regardless of what happened next, I would always remember this day, not for the storm itself, but for those moments of unexpected closeness, for the feeling of Ryan's shoulder pressed against mine, for the conversations we had while the rain fell louder than us, drowning out everything except the connection we shared in that moment. Sometimes the most meaningful experiences come from the simplest circumstances, a forgotten umbrella, a rainy day, an offer of shelter. And sometimes, those experiences leave us changed in ways we couldn't have anticipated, regardless of where they ultimately lead. Total _char_count, 13,428.